It is said that in a universe ruled by unstoppable aliens, beings capable of harnessing incredibly advanced technology and manipulating black holes at will, entire galaxies can be obliterated in an instant. Amid this chaos, an orphaned child embarks on a dangerous journey to find his mother. The story becomes even more intriguing when a group of armed individuals enters a building and begins scanning the surrounding area. One of them notices movement. Immediately, they all raise their guns, switching on their flashlights. Their beams reveal a small child covered in countless scars. He tries desperately to run, but they quickly capture him with a net. Sometime later, the child opens his eyes to find himself lying on a bed. Bright sunlight floods the room, nearly blinding him. The place is a children's shelter. As he slowly attempts to sit up, everything feels unfamiliar. The smooth floor, the clean clothes, and the meals that arrive on schedule. The child spends most of his time on a hill, avoiding others. One day, a group of children finds him alone and tries to invite him to play. Instead, he crouches down like a wild animal, screaming loudly and scaring them away. Just then, a butterfly flutters near his head, and he becomes captivated, playing with it. A red-haired woman observes him through a window. She turns to a nearby girl and asks if the boy is unable to speak. The girl shakes her head, explaining that he simply hasn't learned how yet. She adds that the rescue team suspects he was raised by animals. When she jokingly calls him Mowgli, the other girl looks puzzled. The red-haired woman laughs, remarking that young people today might not recognize the reference, and that's understandable. She explains that it's from a story that existed before the boy arrived. Suddenly, a bell rings from the roof of a house, and all the children gather around a young girl. The boy, known as RMC, watches curiously as she begins distributing letters to the children. Suddenly, he hears a voice. A little red-haired girl explains to him that it's a letter sent by a sponsor, someone who sometimes sends gifts. She asks if he has a sponsor, but he doesn't respond. Undeterred, she grabs his hand and drags him along. Later, they bury him in the soil as they argue about whether adults are good or bad. Half are kind, and half are not. While they eat together, the girl talks about how one child received a massive toy from a sponsor and wouldn't stop bragging about it. She mentions that Lily's sponsor even bought her clothes. As they study, she tells him that Joe actually spoke with his sponsor once, which she finds disgusting. After a moment, she declares that she doesn't need a sponsor because her mom promised to come back for her. That night, as they hide under a table, she confides in him. She says that after she sleeps for just 100 nights, her mom will return, and 100 nights will pass in the blink of an eye. Then, her voice softens. She hopes her mom comes soon. As he listens to her hopes and fears, he gazes at the night sky. The stars seem to blink rapidly as if time is slipping away. One day, someone shows them an alien toy, claiming it came from the farthest reaches of space. A teacher gathers the children and tells them how they all became friends. However, a bespectacled boy interrupts, saying that's not true. Another child asks why the teacher would lie. The boy smirks, explaining that adults say things like that because they think kids are too young to understand the truth. To prove his point, he pulls out a large book and places it in front of them. Curious, another child asks where he got it. He admits that he took it from the principal's office. Flipping through the pages, he begins reading aloud, revealing that long ago, aliens arrived on Earth. Humans fought back using a super powerful weapon called HAEK, but the aliens ate it. In the end, the humans had no choice but to surrender. One of the children frowned and asked why the aliens would eat a weapon. The kid with glasses shrugged and said simply, "They were just hungry." The bell in the tower rang once more, and all the kids gathered around a young girl who was distributing letters. She called out the name Mori, our protagonist, and handed him a letter that had just arrived for him. As he held the letter in his hands, he examined it closely. The young girl told him that he had a sponsor now and asked if he wasn't happy. Suddenly, the clang of a bucket hitting the ground caught his attention. Mori turned to look and noticed the little red-haired girl standing there, her eyes welling with tears. After that, she sat crying under a table. When Mori approached, she told him to go away, so he started pacing around the room. Suddenly, she heard a cracking sound and turned to see what it was. A broken cookie lay on the floor, and Mori stood nearby, looking nervous. She asked if these were the only things he treasured, then sadly picked up the cookie. Hiding her face, she admitted that, in reality, 100 nights had already passed, but her mom still thought she couldn't count to 100. Tears streamed down her face as she murmured that she was all alone now. Suddenly, Mori leaned against her back. Confused, she turned around but soon broke into a quiet smile. She pulled out the cookie and asked if she could really eat it, making Mori uneasy. Then, she waved the cookie in the air in front of the drooling Mori, and they both burst into laughter, playing under the table. That was when she realized he was illiterate. Taking the letter from him, she noticed that it only said, "Hello there." Confused, she turned it upside down, checking for more. Just then, Mori noticed something falling. It was a stunning, radiant blue crystallized flower. He was astonished to see such a thing. Later that night, he held the same flower in his hands, while the other children around him slept. Bringing it close to his nose, he inhaled its scent, mesmerized by its fragrance. Soon after, he drifted into a peaceful sleep. The tower bell rang once more, and a girl excitedly called out to Mori, showing him a new letter. Meanwhile, the red-haired woman handed him several gifts, commenting on how lucky Mori was. When his friends arrived, they were astonished to find Mori seated amidst a towering pile of presents. The red-haired girl started reading his letter, but it was written in basic words and still had untidy handwriting. Meanwhile, his other friends eagerly inspected his gifts. Among them was a talking doll and a set of colored crayons. They wondered who this person was and why they were being so generous. Perhaps they were incredibly wealthy? Or maybe they had some hidden motive. The vibrant crayons gleamed brightly, drawing Mori's attention even more. Just as he was about to eat one, they quickly stopped him. When the red-haired girl showed him how to use it, realization hit him like a lightning bolt. And just like that, time went by. The weather was warm, so the children decided to help with the laundry. They eagerly rolled up their pants and began washing the clothes with their tiny feet, some even turning it into a playful game. Perplexed, the red-haired girl wondered what was so fascinating about it. As Mori stepped on the clothes, little colorful bubbles formed, making him even more excited, until he suddenly slipped and tumbled into the bucket. Someone called out to the red-haired girl, just as she warned Mori not to step too hard. Before she could react, she heard her name being called. Turning around in confusion, she saw a woman rushing toward her, calling out, "Radina!" Overcome with joy, she dashed forward, accidentally toppling the bucket in the process. As she reached the woman, she threw her arms around her, crying out, "Mom!" As Radina embraced her mother in front of the other orphaned children, Mori stood there, completely stunned, watching the scene unfold before him. The next day, Radina's eyes were swollen from crying. She told Mori to take care and cautioned him not to eat too fast, or he'd end up with indigestion. Then, she handed him her shoes and a small bag, gently telling him not to walk around barefoot anymore. Suddenly, she began crying again, looking even more endearing, and quickly wrapped her arms around him. Through her tears, she told him he absolutely had to be happy. Mori smiled and held her just as tightly in return. After some time had passed, Radina stood with her mother, bidding farewell to the other orphaned kids. Among them, Mori silently watched everything unfold. Then, without a word, he returned to his usual spot on the hill. Even though the absence of a friend left a big hole in his heart, he didn't feel lonely, because the letters and gifts someone had sent were still by his side. The cloak was as soft and comforting as warm sunlight. The colorful crayons and talking doll brought him so much joy, and the kind letters carried the gentle scent of fragrant wildflowers. As Mori breathed in the delicate scent of the flowers and the letter, memories began to surface. He recalled the time when his friends eagerly speculated about the sender's identity. In that moment, the image of Radina's joyful face filled his mind. Then Mori pondered, could this person be his mother? Mori gathered his belongings and placed them in the bag his friend had given him. He glanced back one last time and bid farewell to the orphanage in the distance. As he took his first steps, he noticed a railway ahead. Following the tracks, he set off on an unknown path to find his mother. A herd of cows was resting nearby when one wandered over to a pile of dried grass. It licked Mori with its long tongue, waking him up. He wiped his hair with his tiny hands. He was on a train, staring out of the door, unaware that the train he had boarded without hesitation was already carrying him on a long journey to reunite with his mother. Mori stepped onto the ground, bidding farewell to the halted train. He gazed ahead for a while before venturing alone into the vast desert. There was nothing but endless sand and a few scattered rocks, trembling from a distant rumble. Puzzled, Mori turned around. In the far distance, a cloud of dust rose as figures approached. They were humanoid aliens speeding toward him on bikes, armed with guns. A wave of fear washed over him as he tried to flee, but they swiftly surrounded him from all sides. From a cliff above, a figure with red skin, white hair, and a black jacket watched as the aliens encircled Mori. The aliens questioned whether he was truly human, noting the way Mori had crouched like an animal. They debated whether this was really a human and why it was so small. One of them wondered if they could still sell it, which made Mori even more uneasy. Another alien suggested taking a small bite. As he moved closer to Mori, he remarked that it was so small nobody would even notice. One leg wouldn't make a difference. Meanwhile, someone was approaching from behind. Suddenly, another alien slammed the first one to the ground, demanding to know who had given him permission to touch it as he pleased. The alien quickly apologized, addressing him as boss. The boss glanced at Mori and scoffed, saying something this size wouldn't even reach the liver. But then he hesitated, as if realizing something. Suddenly, one of the aliens' heads burst into pieces. They all froze in fear, realizing it was a bullet. Someone was approaching from the distance. An alien with multiple eyes and two horns rode toward them on a sleek, intimidating-looking bike equipped with two machine guns. The boss called him Ryder and directed his goons not to panic, assuring them it was just one opponent. They opened fire on him, but Ryder accelerated his bike, effortlessly dodging every shot. The alien boss grew angrier and charged forward, preparing his right hand to strike. Ryder pushed his speed to the limit, and a massive explosion erupted. As the dust settled, there was nothing under the alien boss's hand, leaving him stunned. Ryder burst from the dust above the boss's head, his gun charging with green energy. He fired a powerful plasma beam, causing the ground to crack into pieces. Mori shielded his eyes from the dust. Ryder slid his bike to a sharp stop. To his left, a colossal crater scarred the ground. He got into an argument with someone, then turned back to look, his gaze landing on a frightened Mori standing there. Ryder stared down at him with his multiple eyes, wondering what this was now, while an enraged Mori glared back at him. Ryder called out to Annie. A small AI emerged from his back, scanned Mori, and informed Ryder that he was a human infant. Suddenly, Ryder smiled. "Little one," he called him, making Mori even more confused. He assures Mori not to worry now that he is here, and introduces him to his friend, Annie, whom he created. He confidently tells Mori that this Ryder will take him home, making the naive boy believe him. Ordering Mori to follow, he smiles, while contemplating his next move. He muses that eating humans isn't illegal, but socially it's considered taboo. He assumes this one isn't worth eating anyway. Tender, perhaps, but with too little meat. They'd barely get 300 for it. Still, it's not bad money. He wonders if they should sell it alive to the caves, as some eccentric folks might want it as a toy. Then he notes that despite its scruffiness, its clothes look surprisingly fine and considers putting it up for auction. Just then, Ryder's eyes fall on the symbol engraved on the backside of Mori's cloak. Calling him Little One, he asks him to wait while he checks something. But the moment he sees the symbol, he freezes in shock. A moment later, he bursts into laughter and mutters that it's already too late. Turning back to Mori, he apologizes, saying he was just too occupied. Then, hopping onto his bike, he remarks that Mori can find his way back on his own and speeds away. Looking back, he sees no one there. Thinking about that symbol, he assumes he nearly ruined his life just now. Annie calls it chickening out, and the furious Ryder snaps at her to shut up. When he complains that it left his throat dry, Someone hands him a water bottle. He thanks them absent-mindedly, but just as he's about to drink, he suddenly stops. A realization dawns on him, leaving him completely bewildered. Looking down, he sees that the person handing him the bottle is none other than Mori. Ryder starts yelling at him and tries to force him off the bike, but just then, a small rock rolls into their path, almost as if introducing itself, and they are sent flying. Sometime later, as Ryder regains consciousness, he clutches his head in pain. He notices something wrapped around his body and picks them up, realizing they are letters. Suddenly, Mori appears before him, his eyes wide open, terrifying Ryder to the point of death. Annie exclaims that he's finally awake and explains that they were worried his body temperature might drop, so the person beside him covered him with some items and started a fire. Ryder, still shaken, expresses his gratitude to both of them. Annie says he needs some rehydration, and Ryder, still dazed, decides to drink some water. Mori hastily rushes off and returns with a water bottle, but a smiling rock gets in his way, causing him to spill the entire contents onto the Ryder's face. The Ryder ends up completely drenched. Realizing his blunder, Mori quickly searches through his small bag for something. Meanwhile, the Ryder watches him closely as he peacefully sorts through his belongings. That's when he notices the symbol, and suddenly, all his doubts become clear. It was Patch, one of the 7 fingers of the beginning and end of the universe. Only the owner of the patch, and those they personally permit, can bear this symbol. To carelessly threaten others with it is like hastening one's own death. The Ryder grows uneasy and instinctively checks his throat. However, he reasons that a human who seems somewhat deficient, yet has a symbol engraved on most of their belongings, along with costly paper worth a month's food budget and letters filled with affection. This can only mean one thing. If they safely deliver this child, they can surely claim a reward. Annie mentions that her battery's running low. The Ryder advises Mori to get some rest. As his bike starts to dematerialize, he surveys the desert, memorizing the path to the city. While walking, a lizard observes them, and the Ryder remarks that someone like him, a lifesaver, is rare to find in this world. Sometime later, the lizard finds its partner, while the Ryder boasts that he is the only one who truly knows the area. Meanwhile, the lizard's family mourns its passing, and yet, Mori and the Ryder are still wandering through the desert. The Ryder speaks to Mori, but soon notices that he's preoccupied with something in the distance. Frustrated, he calls out, demanding to know how Mori dares not pay attention while he's talking. But Mori is in the middle of eating a strange insect. The Ryder is struck speechless by shock and hurriedly tries to make Mori spit it out. When he finally succeeds, he exhales in relief. Just as he's about to scold Mori again, the boy looks away. The Ryder firmly grabs his face and turns it toward him. He explains, if the legs have a bluish tint like this, they might be poisonous. If the roots are swollen and round or turn blue when threatened, they are definitely poisonous. The Ryder asks if he understands, and Mori nods. Thinking there shouldn't be any more trouble now, the Ryder turns away, only to be startled by the sight of Mori removing a tube from his bike. His frustration boils over as he yells at Mori again, this time for touching a dangerous cactus-like plant. Later, Mori ends up stuck in a swamp. After washing him up, the Ryder scolds him once more. Eventually, he collapses onto the ground, completely drained, reflecting on his life choices. Lying there, he glances at Mori, who's drawing something. Slowly, the Ryder crawls toward him to see what he's working on. Mori mumbles something and holds up his drawing, but the Ryder doesn't understand what he's saying. However, he notices a box with Mori written on it and wonders if that's his name. He points at a drawn figure wearing a black jacket and asks what the black thing is. Mori points at his face. The Ryder is shocked. He tries to confirm again. Taking a closer look at the drawing, he stares at it for a long time. It was the first time anyone had drawn him. Annie teases him, saying he seems to be in a good mood. The flustered Ryder fiercely denies it. Glancing at the drawing, Annie assumes that the flat, round figure must be her, and remarks, while the observation skills are decent, the descriptive ability is lacking. I'd give it 50 points. The Ryder grins and suggests that Mori should draw him in a more impressive way. And just like that, the night passes. The next morning, as the sun rises, the rider stands on a cliff, checking their location. He estimates that once they cross the next hill, they will reach their destination. However, his irritation flares when he sees Mori suddenly run off without listening. He warns that if Mori doesn't hurry up, he'll leave him behind. However, he suddenly grows confused upon spotting Mori with an unfamiliar creature and wonders if it is a wild beast. Just then, the ground trembles, and another of its kind emerges to protect the smaller creature. It places a blazing palm on Mori's shoulder, intense flames radiating across its body, deepening Ryder's concern. Ryder immediately aims his gun at the creature, shouting at it. As he fires a shot, the larger one swiftly moves to shield the smaller one, while Ryder rushes toward Mori. When he finally reaches him, despair overtakes him at the sight of the flickering flames. Fear grips him. Mori will be reduced to ashes, leaving no trace behind. But at that moment, Mori's cloak billows, and before Ryder and Annie's stunned eyes, it extinguishes the flames one by one, like an enchanted veil. Beneath the cloak lies a black void, and as the fire disappears, Mori collapses. They stand there in shock, horrified by its power. Worried, Ryder kneels beside Mori, carefully checking him over, only to nearly stumble in shock. Angrily, he glances back, points his gun at the creature, and starts shouting. The creature moves to protect the smaller one and argues back, but Ryder can't understand him. Frustrated, he demands to know if the creature is just pretending to be the victim. The creature grows nervous when Ryder asks if his child is the only one here, and yells that Mori nearly became barbecue. As they argue, something silently approaches them. The ground begins to tremble again, and Annie urgently warns Ryder that something is coming from below. Suddenly, a massive earthworm-like alien emerges, towering over Ryder and Mori as it circles them. Ryder realizes it's an adult. His first thought is that he must send Mori back. Annie warns him that the creature is closing in. But then, to Ryder's surprise, the large creature gently bonks the smaller one that had been arguing with him. Then, both creatures bow their heads in apology. Ryder is utterly baffled by this. He shouts that he won't let them off so easily. Then, to his further confusion, the small creature moves closer to Mori and offers him a shiny stone, mesmerizing him. Mori eagerly rummages through his bag and pulls out a feather in exchange. The small creature's eyes light up, and overjoyed, they begin playfully circling around a bewildered Ryder. After that, the creatures depart on the back of the large one, and the small yellow creature happily looks back at Mori. Ryder, too, glances at Mori, who is tightly clutching his cloak. He tells Mori that he survived because of it. He explains that it's a magical item with excellent protection and likely has temperature-regulating abilities as well. Ryder tells him to be grateful to whoever gave it to him. Joyfully, Mori begins circling around him again. After nightfall, they both sleep on the ground near a fire. As Ryder stares at the flames, his thoughts drift back to the moment with Mori. He calls out to Annie and orders him to display data on humans. A digital screen flickers to life before his eyes, and Annie informs him that this is all the information they have. Ryder frowns. The child must have a mother. Annie looks confused. Ryder sighs and explains, unlike us who divide, humans reproduce. Long ago, when the masters of Earth briefly left for space and then returned, numerous new life forms had emerged in their absence. Among them was a creature driven by immense greed and violent aggression. Humans. They convinced themselves that everything from a single blade of grass beneath their feet to other humans belonged to them. Over time, their population gradually dwindled and eventually disappeared. Seeing how things turned out, Ryder assumes the powerful ones didn't care much about their offspring. He glances at Mori, who is peacefully asleep. Moving closer, he examines Mori's tiny hands. Mori unconsciously grasps his thumb while resting near Ryder and smiles adorably, captivating him with his charm. When Ryder playfully pokes Mori's cheek, Mori shifts away, making the moment even more delightful for him. Elsewhere, someone remarks that the forest surrounding the shelter is completely biodetected, adding that they couldn't have missed it and speculating that it's probably because of the cloak. an alien with 4 eyes responds that he will find it without fail. Meanwhile, Ryder continues playing with Mori, completely unaware of what's happening. The next day, Mori is still asleep when he slowly opens his eyes and finds himself in a vibrant meadow. He gets to his feet and looks around, his eyes widening in awe at its breathtaking beauty. But then he blinks and slowly opens his eyes again. It was all a dream. In reality, he is traveling with Ryder on his bike. Ryder tells Mori to take a look and points out the stunning view of the city. In the heart of the bustling market, Mori gazes up, noticing the unusual architecture and unfamiliar people wandering about. Suddenly, a loud scream echoes through the air, making them both alert. They spot some aliens mesmerized by Mori's cuteness. The aliens surround him, showering him with praises, which only makes Mori more nervous. Ryder quickly pulls Mori away and yells, demanding if they have any idea how much it cost. He then declares that if they want to see him, they must pay, successfully driving them away. Ryder lets out a sigh, realizing Mori draws even more attention than he expected. As he steps into an area filled with peculiar aliens, his frustration grows when some of them take an interest in Mori. They ask if he is the child's owner and whether they may touch him. An alien with yellow hair and 2 horns approaches, demanding to know what's going on. Ryder addresses him as Valentine. Curious about Ryder's intentions, Valentine asks when he decided to raise a human. Ryder firmly responds that Mori is not food and warns him against getting any strange ideas. Amused, Valentine laughs and remarks that no one eats humans these days, calling it barbaric. Ryder then presents one of Mori's letters and asks if he has seen the symbol before. Valentine is taken aback and asserts that the symbol serves as his payment. He recalls encountering it once during a trade negotiation, most likely in the city. A nervous Ryder asks if this is their home, and Valentine confirms it. He gestures toward Mori's black hair, noting that the man he bargained with had black hair as well. Ryder questions why they would come here, to which Valentine cryptically responds that there is a reason for it. Ryder then tries to purchase some parts for his bike, leading to a heated bargaining session where they shout back and forth. Meanwhile, Mori and Annie play together. In the end, Valentine offers a price of 42 and firmly states that he cannot go any lower. Ryder dumps all his belongings on the ground, and Annie suggests selling a battery with 70% charge remaining. However, Ryder insists that it would be a waste to do so. Annie suggests selling Mori's letters, but Ryder scoffs, asking if she expects him to starve to death. He then notices the yellow stone given to him by that creature and shows it to Valentine, asking how much it would sell for, making Mori anxious. Valentine recognizes it as a Thomas stone and suddenly smashes it into pieces on the table. Mori, furious, tries to attack him, but Ryder holds him back. Valentine tells them to take a closer look as the shattered stone begins to tremble. They both stare in shock as it restores itself. Valentine explains that because it absorbs light, it glows at night. Ryder asks if it is valuable, but Valentine replies that it has become so common lately that it's practically worthless. As Ryder drops the stone, Mori tries to catch it, but it rolls away. He follows it, weaving through a crowd of aliens. Just as he reaches for the stone, a strange black hand grabs it at the same time. Confused, Mori looks up and spots a sinister-looking alien with 4 hands. The alien eerily mutters, "Very cute," and moves toward Mori, prompting him to run. Suddenly, the alien grabs Mori by the collar and stuffs him into a strange space beneath his clothes. As Mori tumbles inside, the alien briefly checks on him before sealing the entrance and scanning his surroundings to avoid suspicion. Meanwhile, trapped in the darkness, Mori desperately bangs against the enclosure, making noise and calling for help. While Ryder's chatting with Valentine, he begins to worry and looks around for Mori. Suddenly, he notices something unusual, an alien trying to slip away quietly, as if avoiding attention. Just before leaving, the alien glances back at Ryder with a nervous look in its eyes, deepening Ryder's suspicion. Ryder chases after him and tries to stop him, but the alien slips into the main street, blending in with the crowd. Ryder keeps pursuing him while instructing Annie to scan the area. Just as Ryder reaches out to grab him, the alien leaps off the bridge. Ryder looks down and sees the alien landing on another bridge below. The alien glances back at Ryder, who angrily shouts at him as Annie reports that a life form with a temperature of 36.8 degrees Celsius has been detected in the alien's pocket. Ryder tells Annie he needs to get ahead and cut them off. He sprints in the same direction as the alien, while Annie follows from the other side, scanning the town and generating a virtual map. Analyzing the data on her digital screens, Annie calculates 14 possible routes. Based on the alien's speed and direction, she determines that Route 2 is the most likely path, and begins guiding Ryder, who quickly ascends the stairs ahead. Meanwhile, the alien searches for a hiding spot, as Ryder pushes himself to run at full speed. Annie directs him toward the bridge on the left, just as the alien makes a U-turn. A female alien proudly showcases her masterpiece to a group of kids, when Ryder suddenly dashes past, completely wrecking it. She struggles to hold back tears as he keeps running. As the alien tries to escape, Annie approaches from the opposite direction. She instructs Ryder, who is plowing through everything in his path, to switch to Route 11. Meanwhile, Mori, trapped inside the alien's bag, struggles against the violent shaking, completely terrified. Annie alerts Ryder that they are nearing the predicted destination. The path ahead is blocked by yellow tape. Pushing through it, he finds himself at a dead end and anxiously asks Annie if she's serious. Annie quickly checks her map and urges Ryder to act immediately. He jumps down from the ledge, his white hair-like tail striking the rocks and sending a sharp pain through him. As the alien spots Ryder falling, he makes another U-turn, only to be caught off guard when Annie suddenly appears above him in her bike form, blocking his escape. Now, he is trapped between Annie and Ryder. Weakly, he asks Ryder who he is and why he's chasing him so aggressively. Ryder shouts for Mori, urging him to respond if he can hear him. Faint noises emerge from the alien's clothes. Annie scans the sound and confirms with 98% certainty that it's Mori. Ryder, furious, demands that the alien return his human. The bewildered alien asks what he's talking about. Ryder warns him not to play dumb, insisting that he has a tiny human in his pocket. The alien denies knowing anything, but then brazenly lies, claiming he has been raising Mori all along. He demands to know why Ryder is trying to take something he raised himself. Annie informs Ryder that Mori's fear level is rising, making him even angrier. Pointing his gun at the alien, Ryder shouts for him to stop talking nonsense and hand Mori over immediately. The alien flatly refuses, saying Mori is too cute and that he has decided to raise him. Then, recognizing Ryder, he describes him as a gullible outlaw with a forbidden creation, adding that he's quite notorious. He questions how someone as dangerous as Ryder could raise a human, claiming that he himself could provide greater love and care. He insists that Ryder is only keeping Mori because he cares for him, then challenges him by asking how they are any different. Ryder fires back that if he's so certain, he should let Mori decide whom he wants to be with. The alien scoffs, saying it doesn't matter. Without hesitation, Ryder begins reloading his gun and dematerializes Annie. The alien warns that firing a weapon in town will put him on the wanted list. Ryder replies ominously that it doesn't matter, while Mori desperately cries for help. Mori is terrified because there seems to be no way out of this cramped, dim space. But as he sits down, he suddenly hears a voice speaking to him from the darkness. It's the doll his mother gave him, reminding him not to forget to use the bathroom before bed. On the other side, the alien proposes taking the head while Ryder keeps the body. The energy level of his gun has reached 47%, enough to blow the head off. However, if that guy's pocket was muscle, it would contract forcefully upon impact, and Ryder is uncertain whether the cloak would also prevent the compression. An angry Ryder wonders if he could just get Mori out first. As the alien is speaking, he suddenly notices something and looks down. He sees human waste flowing from his body and is revolted by it. Letting out a loud scream, he watches in horror as Mori pees in his pocket. A grin spreads across Ryder's face as he notices Mori leaping out of the alien's pocket. The alien snarls, calling Mori filthy, his fury intensifying as he reaches out to seize him. However, a gunshot shatters his hand. He howls in agony and hurriedly scrambles to gather his scattered jewelry from the ground. Ryder points his gun at the alien's head and, in a menacing tone, firmly warns him to pay close attention. He makes it clear that if he dares to touch Mori with those filthy hands one more time, he will be forced to crawl like a snake. Ryder turns to check the source of the approaching voices, and when he looks back, the alien has vanished. Annie suspects the gunshot was likely too loud. Without wasting time, Ryder swiftly materializes his bike, adjusts Mori's pants, and races away. As Mori clings to him, Ryder exhales deeply before breaking into joyful laughter. He starts imitating the moment, mimicking how flustered the alien had been earlier. Annie remarks that it was a truly ingenious method. Ryder commends Mori, saying, "Well done." His little toy also praises him, saying it's proud of him, and Mori's mood shifts back to his usual cheerful self. He perches on Ryder's head, feeling majestic. Ryder asks Annie which direction they should take. Assessing the situation, she determines the fastest route, so they decide to head to the whale's cradle. Ryder angrily shouts at Mori not to climb any higher, and Annie urges both of them to stay still while he is driving. After some time, they begin climbing a mountain. When they reach the top, Mori is amazed by how beautiful the view is from there. They wander through forests and abandoned ruins, with Mori playing alongside Annie. At times, they camp outdoors, eating meat and avoiding dangerous creatures. One time, when Ryder switches on his torch, Mori suddenly beats him up. Annie records in her database that Mori fears bright spotlights. As they traveled, they left messages behind. Annie picked up a wooden board, and he and Mori drifted in the water while playing with Ryder. As they approached a dark cave, numerous glowing eyes stared at them from within. When the monsters emerged, Ryder grabbed Mori and bolted, while Annie took his left shoe. Sometime later, Mori sat with Annie, holding a crayon, and together they doodled on Ryder's sleeping face. After that, they rode a bike through breathtaking mountains and lush grasslands. Mori spotted a light in the distance and curiously gazed up at the sky. Giant whales soared above, leaving him even more astonished. Among them, he noticed a baby whale drifting down near the surface. Mori raised his hand, reaching out to touch it. Ryder, understanding his intent, lifted him into his arms. Enchanted, Mori gazed at the sky and raised his left hand again. As the baby whale floated above his head, it felt as if he were touching its fin, making the moment even more magical. They continued their journey like that. As Mori slept peacefully, he slowly opened his eyes and found himself cradled in a woman's gentle embrace as she comforted him with soft words. He closed his eyes and drifted back into sleep. When he woke again, he was wrapped in a jacket. Ryder looked down at him, noticing he was awake. Ryder blamed Annie for it, but Annie insisted she was just being cautious. She told him that if he was unsatisfied, he should drive himself. Ryder refused, saying autonomous driving was a luxury. Annie mocked him, asking if he was incapable of doing anything without her. Annoyed, Ryder reminded her that he was the one who created her. Ryder stopped his bike in front of a breathtaking, snow-covered mountain and remarked that this place hadn't changed. Annie suggested they move quietly from here. Ryder reminded her that they had seen them stirring at night, and assumed that if those guys woke up and broke their legs, they'd be forced to take the long way around. Ryder decided to show Mori something incredible. Annie questioned whether he was over-equipped and wondered if Mori could even walk. She thought it was unnecessary since Mori had that ultra-defensive cloak. Ryder responded that they could never be too sure what might happen. Besides, wouldn't it be fun to roll Mori up into a ball? Annie called it abuse. As Ryder tried to convince a bewildered Mori, Annie noticed something in the distant snowy mountains. She began scanning the area and urgently called out to Ryder, warning him of a fast-approaching presence. He wondered if they were hunters sent from town. Ryder was stunned when Annie calculated their speed at approximately 491 kilometers per hour. He focused ahead, trying to spot who was approaching. As he waits, a sudden overwhelming pressure emanates from the opposite direction. A bad feeling washes over him. He summons his bike, swiftly mounts it, and slams the accelerator. He pushes his speed to the limit. Annie assesses the closing distance and estimates 2 minutes and 45 seconds until his arrival. Then she recalculates. The remaining time is now 53 seconds. Mori curiously glances back as a figure emerges from the snowy mountains, rapidly approaching. Annie detects him and swiftly alerts Ryder, who brings his bike to a sliding stop and aims his gun forward, unleashing a powerful plasma beam. The energy of the shot vanishes, leaving Ryder bewildered. His shock deepens as he spots a black hole consuming the energy. Suddenly, a massive explosion occurs, and Ryder shields Mori's body from the shockwave. A figure emerges from the thick snow dust, stepping forward. It's the same alien who had been tasked with finding something. Ryder can't believe it. He's never heard of a hunter capable of manipulating black holes. He questions whether they would go so far as to hire someone like that, just because he fired a few shots in town. The alien halts at a distance but notices Mori in Ryder's arms and silently observes him. Ryder asks Annie about his chances of victory if he goes all out. She responds, 16%. Stunned, he presses for an explanation, and Annie clarifies that there's a 7% margin of error accounting for natural disasters. Ryder trusts Annie's probabilities to be highly accurate and concludes that the opponent is undoubtedly powerful. Determined to avoid a direct confrontation, he strategizes his next move. After a brief moment of thought, he points his gun forward and shouts, "It's now or never!" before firing a plasma beam at a nearby mountain. Pushing his bike to its limits, he commands Annie to release the limiter. A warning flashes on the bike's display, indicating the activation of overclock mode. As he accelerates further, Annie cautions him to watch out for fractures due to the impact. He charges his gun and fires another plasma beam, striking a snowy mountain directly. An avalanche begins cascading down. Ryder pushes his bike to maximum output, believing that if they can just reach the bridge, they might have a chance to escape. He speeds ahead as the avalanche rapidly closes in behind them, but manages to escape safely. Pushing even faster, he shouts at Mori to hold on tight. Mori's face is smothered by the rushing air, and Ryder grows disoriented upon realizing the bridge ahead is completely gone. At that moment, the alien closes the distance between them. Ryder whips out his gun and begins shooting plasma beams at the alien, but it easily blocks them with its black hole and continues chasing him. Ryder can't comprehend why the guy shows no intention of attacking, but he thinks that if they can just reach the bridge, they might escape. But in that instant, the alien is suddenly right in front of his face. Stunned, Ryder's eyes widened as the alien grabbed him by the throat, tightening its grip around his neck. Desperately, Ryder struggled, thrashing his legs. He pulled out his gun and fired at the alien, but the black hole rendered it ineffective. The alien seized Ryder's hand with its white tentacle and tightened its grip around his throat. Gritting his teeth in anger, Ryder watched as the alien turned to look at Mori. It began reaching toward Mori, but upon seeing his unwilling expression, the alien hesitated, surprised. As it gradually loosened its grip on Ryder's neck, Ryder quickly regained focus. With a sudden burst of energy, he leaped high into the air, executing a backflip midair before plunging off the cliff. As they fell, he asked Mori if he was familiar with this place. The alien rushed toward them, but before it could reach them, a massive whale emerged, Ryder clinging to one of its fins. Retrieving his bike, Ryder noticed the alien did nothing but watch Mori closely. Mori looked down at it as the whales began to depart. Later, Ryder slowly woke up in front of Annie and Mori. He asked if he had passed out, and Annie explained that he had likely been short of breath due to the sudden change in altitude. Concerned, Ryder asked about Mori's condition, to which Annie reassured him that Mori was fine. She commended Ryder for his strategy of awakening the sleeping whales. As he scanned his surroundings, he realized they were now in the city. First, Ryder set Mori down, and they both watched as the whales drifted away. Ryder then decided to head for the entrance. Annie cautioned him, unsure whether the warrant had reached the city yet, and suggested he disguise himself. As his horns began to dissolve, they curved downward, and his hair cascaded over his face. Shrugging off his jacket, he called out to Mori. Mori turned back in bewilderment, leaving Ryder equally perplexed. Suddenly, Mori began squirming and frantically searching for Ryder. Lifting Mori, who was anxiously trying to break free, Ryder tried to reassure him that it was him. Annie assumed Mori didn't recognize Ryder due to his changed hairstyle. Frustrated, Ryder asked what he was supposed to do now. An idea struck Annie. She sat on Mori's head, wrapping him in his cloak, while Mori sat on Ryder's head, draped in his jacket. They started walking while arguing with each other, finding the situation uncomfortable. Suddenly, they stopped as someone greeted them before the entrance of the city. It was a bot, asking how it could assist them. Annie told it they were here to meet the patch. The bot asked them to show the insignia. Mori began searching for something. He took out his bag and accidentally slammed it into Ryder's face. Meanwhile, Annie showed the bot the letter. In response, the bot presented them with a magical list from the owner, displaying the names of all members who could use the patch's insignia. It then asked which one they were searching for. Ryder, now worried, realized he hadn't considered that the members might be scattered in different places. Annie hesitated, unsure of whom to choose. Mori glanced up at the magic circle before rummaging through his little bag. He pulled out a crystallized blue flower and showed it to the bot, which scanned it and identified only one person associated with it. The bot conjured a black door before them, but they failed to understand what it was and assumed it to be some kind of portal. They circled around it, hesitantly reaching out to touch it. The bot reassured them not to worry, explaining that no matter which direction they walked, they would reach their destination. Annie thanked it. Ryder was the first to cautiously extend his hand into the portal before stepping through. They walked for a while inside and eventually emerged onto a lush green grassland. Both were awestruck as they gazed at a magnificent mansion nestled amidst the greenery. Ryder asked what was up with that house, and Annie assumed it belonged to someone with a unique taste. Mori, however, imagined it resembling his previous orphanage, which brightened his mood. He eagerly approached it, with Ryder slowly following behind. As they stood before the front gate, Ryder reminded them that they had been warned. Someone could die if they entered the city without an invitation. Urging both of them to stay close, he searched for a button he was supposed to press. Mori suddenly heard a voice and moved closer to the front gate. Spotting someone near the window, he watched closely. When he saw a woman with long black hair, he became excited, but she quickly disappeared from sight. Without hesitation, Mori squeezed his tiny body through the gate bars and ran toward the house, ignoring Ryder's angry shouts behind him. Reaching the house, Mori began climbing through the window, while Ryder continued to warn him about the danger. Ryder nervously tries to press the doorbell, but there's nothing to open the door. Meanwhile, Mori lands inside the house and finds himself in a long hallway. He notices an open door making a noise and quickly moves forward, eager to see his mom. Stepping into the room, he spots someone from behind, only to realize it's a penguin-like alien. Confused, the alien asks who he is and how he got in. Mori grows even more nervous. While they are caught up in a discussion about how they weren't expecting any guests and whether they should investigate, Mori hesitantly tries to slip away. Suddenly, the scent of blue crystallized flowers catches his nose, and he starts looking around for it. The alien attempts to stop him, but he quickly dashes away. Noticing another open door at the other end of the corridor, he rushes toward it and reaches out to open it, only to bump into someone carrying the same fragrance of blue crystallized flowers. He quickly looks up and finds countless eyes staring down at him, eerie wings covering the person's face. Mori becomes speechless. He recalls the moment when Radina met her mom, then glances back at the alien. She extends her hand, and Mori remembers his dreams of meeting his own mother. As she reaches out to touch his head, he suddenly bursts into tears, his face adorably expressive. When Ryder arrives, calling out to him, Mori cries even louder, troubling both the alien and Ryder. After some time passes and things settle down, Mori sits quietly under the bed, facing a corner. Ryder urges him to come out, while Annie gently tries to lure him with the promise of snacks. The other aliens watch as they try to coax Mori out. Eventually, Ryder steps out of the room. The alien with wings on her head asks how it went. Ryder responds that it isn't working and assumes Mori just needs some time alone. She remarks that he seems really upset. Ryder admits it's the first time he's ever seen him cry like that. She then assumes she wasn't as skilled as she believed, which surprises him. She introduces herself as Miria, Mori's sponsor and the proprietor of Pei. As night falls, stars become visible through the window, Ryder sleeps peacefully, while Mori slowly emerges from under the bed, his eyes swollen from excessive crying. He looks at Annie, who is recharging, then at Ryder, who remains asleep. Climbing onto the bed, he firmly slaps Ryder's face. The drowsy Ryder groggily tells him not to do that. Mori shoots him a glare, then peers out through the door. He finds the corridor filled with moonlight and slowly begins to crawl ahead, while someone watches him from a corner. As he steps into the kitchen, he carefully tries to stand while looking ahead and notices some fruit on a shelf. He remembers Ryder suggesting he try those delicious fruits, but they are out of reach. Climbing a bit higher, he finally grabs one, filling him with joy. Just then he hears a slurping sound and turns around. He notices Miria watching him from the doorway. In reality, she had been lighting candles, lost in sad thoughts. She had heard sniffing sounds and turned around, spotting Mori in the corridor. From that moment, she began observing him. However, as soon as Mori noticed her, he became completely startled and started frantically bouncing around the kitchen. This paralyzed her with fear, and she quickly fled. After some time, Mori finally settled down and swiftly found a hiding spot, while Miria remained concealed behind the wall. Suddenly, her gaze landed on some fruit. She observed them for a moment before picking one up. Then, she peeked into the kitchen and spotted Mori crouched behind the table. Realizing he was trying to reach the fruit, an idea sparked in her mind. She gently placed a fruit on the floor, letting it slowly roll until it stopped in front of Mori, who reacted with alarm. After a while, he calmed down, but the fruit remained untouched. Then, a tiny hand emerged from under the table, which Miria quickly noticed as Mori began eating it. Another fruit rolled to a stop in front of Mori. Wasting no time, he snatched it and quickly hid behind the table, which filled Miria with excitement. She kept repeating this for a while until Mori was completely satisfied. As the next day dawns, Mori wakes up to the sound of the maids and becomes alert. He quickly flees, but almost collides with Ryder, who halts him with his tail. Mori looks up to see who it is. Ryder asks where he's rushing off to, while Annie notices something on his face and tells him to wash up. Suddenly, Mori clings to his leg, and Ryder quickly scoops him up, exclaiming, "What's gotten into you this early in the morning?" Annie smirks, remarking that while his words may protest, his actions tell the truth. He calls out to Mori and recalls what happened yesterday. Miria mentions that she isn't sure since Mori's language differs from that of humans, and she informs Ryder that Mori had left the shelter. She only tracked him toward his home and had no idea he would come this way. She admits she doesn't know how to convey his gratitude. She places a box in front of the anxious Ryder and urges him to open it. As he hesitantly starts, he is stunned by what he finds inside. A stunning, radiant crystal, which is actually a star fragment. Ryder estimates it must be worth around 60,000. He becomes overjoyed, realizing he is wealthy now. Letting out a nervous laugh, he then hears Miria express her gratitude for his hard work and her decision to send her assistant to escort him out. But when Ryder thinks of Mori, his smile completely fades. He begins reminiscing about every cherished moment spent with him, from his playful antics to his adorable sleeping expression. Suddenly, he mutters that he isn't ready yet, leaving Miria completely baffled. A nervous Ryder urges her to consider how much Mori cares about him. He can't just leave him behind. He explains that if he suddenly disappears, Mori will be devastated, and besides, he isn't exactly free to go either. He tries to assure her that he can stay by Mori's side until he adjusts. Miria asks if he can truly do that for them. While Ryder is deeply engaged in the conversation, someone approaches them. When he turns back, he's horrified to see a four-eyed alien standing behind him. Miria introduces him as her assistant, Yahello. She asks for forgiveness for her earlier rudeness, explaining that she initially mistook Ryder for a kidnapper, trying to exploit Mori. Ryder responds that it's fine. The scene shifts back to the present, where Annie asks, "Is that so?" Ryder covers Mori's ears and tells Annie to stay quiet, saying that Mori wouldn't understand difficult words anyway. She questions why he's covering Mori's ears if that's the case. He suggests that Mori explore the area with Annie while he discusses things with the others. Annie agrees that it's a good idea, and Mori leaves. Miria welcomes everyone and invites them to sit wherever they feel comfortable. Once most have gathered, she begins explaining the situation. They still hadn't been able to contact Shalom. Curious, Ryder interrupted to ask who Shalom was. The others laughed, teasing him, saying that everyone knew the judge. Their reaction annoyed Ryder, but before he could say anything, Miria continued. She explained that the judge was the master of earth and the ruler of life. His 2 arms wielded the omnipotence of weight, while his 3 legs commanded the authority of balance. Along with her Patch and 7 others, they had been granted the power to open black holes for him. Shalom was one of those 7. Miria then added that the black hole Jiel had used was actually a fragment of her own power, something she had lent him. She went on to explain that Shalom's domain stretched from the mountain range to the river of Redan. Finally, she pointed out that the shelter where Mori had stayed was located in this very forest. It was all under Shalom's authority, so they had to communicate through him, even when Mori vanished. She assumed they couldn't reach Shalom from the shelter, and also hadn't received the usual newsletter about Mori for several weeks, which was why they had been delayed in searching for him. One of them reassured the group, saying it was probably nothing serious, as Shalom was an exceptionally busy person. These days, once he drifted into sleep, it was difficult to meet him. Miria decided to continue sending messages since they had no idea what was happening. She then instructed Ryder to stay with Mori and not to move until they contacted Shalom. He responded, "Understood." Beside him, the maid rose ominously and asked if they should begin the real meeting. Ryder wondered what that meant. She then took out some tiny tableware and displayed it, leaving Ryder completely baffled, especially by its size. Ryder asked, "What is this?" She answered, "It's Mori's personal tableware, which I crafted yesterday." Ryder exclaimed, "How am I supposed to eat with this?" She replied, "Mori is incredibly small, only as big as a finger." Ryder, still incredulous, questioned if Mori was some kind of ant, while the others tried to calm him down. Another maid approached Ryder, saying she had anticipated this and had made plenty of tableware. She then led them to a giant bed, explaining that Mori liked staying underneath it, where he could even split 40 times. The others eagerly showed Ryder the things they had made for Mori. Ryder silently chuckled, thinking they were really getting excited. Meanwhile, Mori was with Annie, who was showing him around the house. Occasionally, Mori would draw on the floor and glance out the window. Then, they played in the kitchen. Afterward, Mori pointed at various objects while Annie told him what they were. Suddenly, he pointed at something strange that Annie didn't recognize. Mori attempted to climb onto it, assuming it was leftover material from a previous project. Once on the table, he carefully examined the drawings. Annie recognized them as handmade items and told Mori she was referring to his cloak. As he gazed at the drawings, memories of the gifts sent to his orphanage resurfaced. He gently touches the sketch with his tiny hands, envisioning Miria working on these creations, which makes him deeply understand her feelings. Someone arrives and calls out to Mori. It is the maid, explaining how much effort they put into stopping Miss Miria from leaving to search for him. She asks what they had been doing, and Annie replies that they were exploring the mansion. Noticing Mori fidgeting with his bag, the maid asks if they liked it. Annie then says she doesn't understand how a building like this suddenly appeared in the city. The maid explains that this is a villa Miss Miria built herself, because she wanted to understand Mori. Mori and Annie step out of the room just as Miria passes through the corridor. Mori locks eyes with her. The moment she notices him, he panics and bolts away, leaving her disheartened. Ryder catches the moment and takes note of it. He mulls it over, and after a day passes, he finally speaks up, saying it would be best if they became friends. Miria's face lights up as she says, "That would be wonderful." Intrigued, Annie turns to Ryder and asks if he has any ideas on how to make that happen. Suddenly, a spark ignites in Ryder's mind, and they set Operation Befriend Mori into motion. The first strategy is snacks, with Miria offering her homemade cookies to Mori. But the plan flops miserably since anyone could do that. Meanwhile, as they snack on cookies, Ryder and Annie suddenly realize they have completely overlooked something. The second step is to spark Mori's interest by showcasing his favorite things. Ryder studies the situation intently and says, "Perfect. while Miria boldly stitches all of Mori's treasured items onto her outfit. Annie suddenly recalls seeing something similar in one of Mori's drawings. Following Ryder's plan, she casually strolls past him. As Miria approaches, Mori glances back at her and instantly shifts into his unusual state. She quickly apologizes, reassuring him that she'll return everything right away. The third step is to create a sense of familiarity using a bike. Ryder is convinced that Mori likes him, so doubling the effect will make an even bigger impact. Annie brings out the bike and Ryder eagerly starts teaching Miria how to ride it. But with one reckless twist of the accelerator, the bike rockets forward, leaving Ryder barely hanging on while Mori bolts in the opposite direction. Annie smirks, casually mentioning that she's the one doing most of the driving these days, only adding fuel to Ryder's frustration. The fourth step is to recreate the moment Ryder first formed his friendship. Handing Miria his clothes, he explains that the other guy has agreed to play the villain, so when danger strikes, she can swoop in and save the day. A dark shadow looms over Mori as Giles suddenly steps forward. Ryder urges Miria that this is her chance, and she quickly swings the door open, only to freeze in shock. Mori has already taken Giles down. Ryder storms in, furious at the betrayal, shouting that they had agreed on bullying. They try again and again, but every attempt ends in failure. As the night deepened, rain poured outside, filling the air with a steady rhythm. Mori slept peacefully on the bed, lost in his dreams, until a haunting memory surfaced, pulling him into a nightmare. He jolted awake, his breath unsteady. Glancing around the dark room, he found himself alone, but the fear in his eyes was undeniable. As he sat there, a sudden bolt of lightning split the sky, its sharp crack sending shockwaves through the air. Mori jolted upright, his body tensing as fear took hold. Pressing himself into a corner, he stood frozen before slowly inching toward the door, cautiously pushing it open in search of someone. Meanwhile, Ryder remained completely absorbed in his latest modification. He cautiously made his way down the dim corridor as rain hammered against the windows. His eyes darted around anxiously until he spotted a faint glow from an open door ahead. Moving stealthily, he peeked inside and saw Miria resting in a chair by the crackling fireplace, lost in deep sleep. As Mori crawled toward the warmth of the fire, his eyes landed on a paper lying on the floor. It was a report on child behavior observation, leaving him puzzled. As he inched closer to the fire, a sudden crack of lightning tore through the sky, startling him. In his panic, he instinctively leaped onto Miria, burying his face against her. Still lost in sleep, she wrapped her arms around him in a gentle embrace, completely catching Mori off guard. He cautiously lifted his gaze, realizing she was still asleep. Gradually, he relaxed, settling into the warmth as he hugged her back. A strange sensation stirred within him as memories flooded his mind. The gifts she had given him. It slowly dawned on him that she was like a mother to him. As time passed, Miria slowly blinked awake, wondering when she had fallen asleep. She decided to return to her room, but froze in surprise upon finding Mori nestled in her arms. Confused, she wondered why he was there and how long he had been. As she glanced around, she considered calling Ryder and Annie. Suddenly, Mori clung to her even tighter. She watched him silently, noticing how peacefully he rested in her embrace, and a deep blush crept onto her face. Nervously, she wrapped both arms around him, pulling him even closer. As time passed, morning arrived. Ryder stirred from his sleep, and Annie remarked, "Good work," before adding that it had taken longer than expected. Ryder responded that he had run it for quite a while back then. Deciding not to push himself too much for now, he continued walking. The passing workers greeted him, but their unusually excited reactions left him puzzled. They eagerly bombarded him with questions about his health. Suddenly, a letter arrived at their front door, and one of the workers grew anxious, too busy to retrieve it. Ryder reassured her that he'd handle it. She thanked him as he headed down to get it. Before he crouched at the doorstep, she reminded him to deliver it to Miria. As he picked up the letter, he realized it was a notice, informing people that he was dangerous. The words leave him completely speechless. Just then, Miria calls out to him, making him jump in surprise. Ryder quickly hides the mail and nervously comments that Miria seems to be in a great mood this morning. She asks if it's that obvious and wonders if he's free today by any chance. He replies that he has all the time in the world. She says that's perfect and mentions something about Mori's clothes. Ryder suddenly remembers that he's currently being hunted. Lost in thought, he realizes he was so shocked to see Mori crying that he completely forgot and absent-mindedly told her it was good. She then asks if they should start getting ready to head out, leaving Ryder utterly baffled. He hesitantly asks where. She casually replies, "To the center," making his situation even worse. His heart sinks as he asks if she means the city center, and she cheerfully confirms it without a second thought. Ryder's stomach drops. He's in deep trouble. After that, some aliens usher them into a peculiar white room that feels both strange and unfamiliar. Wearing a mask, Ryder questions where they have arrived. Miria explains that this is a place where clothes are commonly tailored. The shop owner mentions that designs can first be previewed virtually and tried on, so modifications can be made instantly. Since the shop specializes in fully custom-made clothing, clients are required to visit in person, as it's a core part of the shop's unique philosophy. Miria adds that human clothes are difficult to find, so it's wiser to rely on professionals rather than attempting to make them independently. The shop owner says they've heard plenty about Mori. Ryder glares at Miria, and she expected it, acknowledging that the shop's staff are quite imposing, but assuring him they were prepared for this. Then, they reveal the countermeasures obtained from Miria, effortlessly drawing his interest. Ryder warns that following along so easily is dangerous, sending a chill through Miria as she rushes to Mori. Ryder recalls when he was utterly shaken. He had never imagined a dedicated portal could stretch all the way here. He thinks that the rich really are different, and that it was fortunate they didn't encounter anyone on the way. However, he also recalls asking Annie to locate the cameras. She begins scanning the area and reports that precise scanning is difficult due to security measures. However, she notes that there is one object with a lens behind Ryder, 2 in front, and security personnel within 5 meters outside the door. He wonders what he should do. Should he stay quiet for now and return to the mansion? Or should he quickly pack up and leave this place? As they lower the curtains, they unveil Mori dressed in a bear costume holding a honeycomb. Ryder excitedly exclaims that it's adorable, but Annie questions why he's getting so worked up. She also asks Miria why she's crying. Miria quickly adjusts the outfit on the panel before her and selects another, a jester costume with 2 wings on his head. A sharp cry escapes from Miria, and she quickly covers her mouth, insisting it's amazing. However, Annie simply remarks that it merely seems that way. Then, Ryder takes the digital screen from Miria and tries on a dress for Mori. He transforms into a heavy metal rock star with a 4-wheeled bike, its handlebar made of a skull. Ryder excitedly exclaims, "This is it!" But Anise quickly dismisses their approach, saying it makes no sense. Determined to do it himself, she steps forward, and Mori's attire shifts into a Sunil-like form, while advanced technology seamlessly integrates with his body. She excitedly exclaims that it's perfect. The store owner, intrigued by the transformation, decides to give it a try himself. In a breathtaking moment, he morphs into a flowing dress with 2 wings sprouting from his head, while Miria holds him steady in awe. They change Ryder's shirt while holding Mori, who's dressed in a tuxedo with a cookie near his mouth. Suddenly, a thought crosses Ryder's mind. The wanted poster isn't his fault. And though firing a gun in town is illegal, it happened because Mori was kidnapped. He wonders if they'll truly understand. He calls out to Miria, saying he has something to share, but hesitates midway, recalling the eerie alien's words, "How could someone as dangerous as you raise a human?" rendering him completely speechless. He also remembers when Miria mentioned that their guides would escort him on his way out, which only deepens his concern. Glancing at Miria and Mori, he asks if the letter written for Mori really means lovely circle, because he's been wondering about its meaning for a while now. Miria rummages through her clothes and pulls out a picture, showing it to Ryder. It depicts a grassland with something barely discernible in the distance. Miria explains that, as usual, she was handling documents when she came across a letter from Shalom. It resembled a flyer being handed out in the city, so she was about to disregard it. But then, she chose to play it instead. Suddenly, she found herself in a vast, vibrant grassland and realized it was a video all along. In the distance, a lone house caught her eye. Beyond it, a hill rose where someone sat hidden among the tall grass, barely visible. Curiosity gripped her as she strained to see more clearly. Standing there was little Mori, gazing back at her. She was spellbound, exclaiming, "It's too round," and wondering, how can something be that round? As the video neared its end, she received the picture and concluded the story, but a radiant smile glowed on her lips. She tells Ryder they recorded from afar because Mori was afraid of the camera. Apparently, he was watching an ant. She adds that before she even realized it, she had already completed the sponsorship process and was picking out a gift for Mori. She asks if it seems a bit dull. Ryder disagrees, saying it's a solid start, then silently mutters, "Unlike someone else." While Annie was selecting the best materials for Mori, a worker behind them struggled with his task and accidentally dropped the digital screen, causing the lights to shut off. She quickly apologizes and decides to turn it back on immediately. Mori fidgeted with his tiny hands, but when the light suddenly flickered on above his head, he froze in fear, staring up at the glowing, round-shaped lamp as a wave of past trauma that crashed over him. Mori rashly ran toward the door, while Ryder and Miria were suddenly shocked to see him rush outside. As Mori dashed out, he bumped into someone's leg, and due to the impact, he was sent flying. Nervously, he looked up to see what it was. It was an alien with no face, only a glowing light in place of one, and legs resembling those of a horse, poised to crush him. Seeing this, Ryder rushed toward Mori, shouting his name in worry. However, Annie quickly reminded him that if he went outside now, the surveillance cameras would catch him. Realizing this, Ryder hesitated, but his emotions took over, and his body moved on its own out of concern for Mori. At that moment, he noticed the camera slowly turning toward him. Just then, Miria swiftly stepped in to cover him, shocking Ryder. Raising his palm, Miria cast something resembling a black hole with a faint floral scent. Mori, noticing the scent, instinctively followed it and slid toward Miria and Ryder. The two of them rushed toward him, emotions running high, asking if he was okay and if he was hurt. Annie analyzed him and noted that his pulse was elevated, while Miria observed that he seemed to be sweating. Looking up at them, Mori's eyes welled with tears, and he grabbed them for comfort. That night, as darkness fell, Mori drifted into sleep, clutching a drawing with an email letter on top of it. Watching him sleep, Miria turned to Ryder and said that it didn't seem to be just because of the light. Ryder agreed, noting that the light from a gun was much brighter, yet they had never reacted like this before. He recalled that even when he had accidentally burned down all the trees, a false scenario he made up, Mori had been fine despite the incredible brightness. Hearing Ryder's story, Annie cursed in her mind, while Miria listened carefully. Miria then explained that the reason their mansion used more flames than electric lights was because records indicated that when Mori's friend was with them, they had only used oil lamps and candles. Annie then suggested it was because of lightning, mentioning a record of them reacting sensitively to spotlights before. Ryder agreed, recalling that when they were in a cave, Mori had seemed a bit scared when he used a flashlight. Only now did Ryder realize that whenever the light suddenly got bright, Mori would react. Store lights, for example, had a circular beam. Upon hearing the mention of circular light, Miria seemed lost in thought, deep in contemplation. After that night in Miria's room, she seemed to be getting a book, placing it on her table as if she were busy with something. After that, she went to find Ryder and said something to him, while Annie and Mori were playing. The three of them seemed to be planning something for Mori, working on something in the back, while Mori was busy coloring a book. Then night fell once again. A maid appeared to be giving them a signal, while another maid carried Mori, laughing and chatting with him. It was then revealed that they had planned to show Mori something like a movie theater. Mori and the others sat down, though he seemed confused. On the stage, Annie stood holding a book, with a background full of plants and flowers, giving the scene a forest-like atmosphere. After a moment, Annie began to speak, saying, "Once upon a time, In a forest, there were 3 little pigs. As she continued the story, Mori became captivated, watching intently. Annie went on. A wolf lived there as well. Mori seemed to be enjoying it, and the others watched him fondly. The story continued, describing how the wolf secretly watched as the pigs decided to build their own houses. Ryder seemed happy watching Mori enjoy it. Then, a scene revealed how they had planned everything. Ryder had asked what a shadow play was, and Miria had explained that they would start with a square-shaped light beam and slowly transition it into a circular one, focusing it on the play. Mori seemed fascinated by it, as Miria and Ryder worked hard to make a good show for him, hoping to create pleasant memories. Just then, Annie was shocked to see the cover of the storybook. It had a drawing of Mori, with Miria and Ryder clashing playfully while laughing. At that moment, Annie remembered that, while they had been busy preparing, Mori had also been busy drawing. However, she hadn't expected that the book Mori had been drawing in was the actual storybook they were going to use. With no other choice, Annie decided to make up the story as she went along. She continued. Then, the little pigs decided to trust each other and work together, combining their construction budget and floor area ratio, with the expertise of builders who had built 3 houses. Hearing this, Miria and Ryder looked confused. Annie went on. They created an ultra-mega-amazing super alloy 4th house to fight against the wolf. As she said this with enthusiasm, Miria began sweating nervously, while Ryder, utterly baffled, shouted, "What kind of nonsense is that story?" The 2 of them started arguing, but then Mori suddenly opened his mouth and burst into laughter. They were surprised and captivated by his laughter, as neither Ryder nor Miria had expected it. They looked at each other, smiles forming on their faces, realizing they had done a good job. Seeing that their plan had worked and Mori was genuinely enjoying himself, they continued the story. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a dark figure was seen walking, ordering 2 guards to call Maria. A bright morning arrived, filling the room with golden sunlight. Mori stirred awake, his eyes wide and groggy, a little drool still clinging to his lips. As he blinked against the dazzling light, a voice called out to him. He looked up and saw Annie standing there, greeting him with a cheerful, "Good morning!" Mori's face lit up with excitement and he rushed toward her, his joy evident in every step. Annie chuckled, noting how he seemed to be in a particularly good mood today. "You're up earlier than usual," she teased. Mori stretched his small body, rolling around on the bed before suddenly stopping. His gaze fell on Ryder, who was still curled up beneath a blanket, clearly struggling to wake up. Just as Mori was about to poke him, Ryder groggily pulled the blanket away and, without warning, wrapped Mori in a tight hug. "Just give me 10 more minutes," Ryder mumbled sleepily. Mori wiggled free, hopped off the bed, and dashed toward the door, with Ryder and Annie watching him curiously. As he ran into the hallway, he encountered 2 maids who greeted him with warm smiles. "Good morning, young master. Did you sleep well?" one asked. Another maid appeared and gently scolded him. "Be careful running around. It's dangerous." Ignoring the warning, Mori continued his energetic sprint until he reached another door. As he burst inside, Miria welcomed him with an outstretched hand, smiling as if she had been expecting him. Time passed quickly, and before they knew it, a whole month had gone by since Mori first arrived. At that moment, he stood in the kitchen, gleefully grabbing handfuls of flour and tossing them into the air like snowfall. Beside him, Annie laughed as they played together. But the fun was short-lived. A maid gasped in horror upon seeing the mess. "Mori, I just cleaned this," she cried, rushing over in a panic as the flour coated the floor in a fine white layer. Before Mori could respond, his stomach let out a loud growl. Annie, noticing the sound, tilted her head. "Are you hungry?" she asked. The moment the words left her mouth, 3 more maids stormed into the room, their expressions frantic. "Is it true? Is Mori hungry?" they demanded. Their concern quickly escalated as they examined him, dramatically concluding that he was getting thinner by the second. Overcome with worry, they panicked, determined to fix the situation immediately. Without hesitation, the head chef sprang into action, slicing ingredients with lightning speed and frying rice with the skill of a master chef. His movements so precise, it was as if he were channeling Gordon Ramsay himself. At last, a steaming plate of food was set before Mori. He wasted no time, devouring every bite like a vacuum. By the time he was finished, he fell back onto the floor, his belly round and full, looking utterly stuffed. Seeing this, the maids let out a collective sigh of relief. After that, Mori bumped into Yahello. Seeing how dirty Mori was, Yahello immediately grabbed him and dragged him to the bathroom, scrubbing him up and down to remove the dirt from his body. Annie, witnessing this, quickly stepped in, demanding that Yahello be gentler. "You're washing him like he's laundry," she scolded. Once they were done, Mori wandered into Miria's room where she was writing at her desk. He stood there watching her intently. Noticing his gaze, Miria looked up, the light casting a radiant glow around her. To Mori she looked absolutely stunning, almost sparkling. His eyes widened in awe, captivated by how beautiful his mother was. Just then Ryder entered the room, smirking as he observed them. What an incredibly studious sight, he mused, watching Mori sitting by Miria's side, scribbling on a small table while she happily guided him. Annie was also nearby, watching Mori with amusement. Curious, Ryder asked what they were doing. Miria smiled and replied, "I'm helping Mori copy the letters written on the word cards." Annie, however, leaned in and frowned. "They're all wrong," she pointed out. Ryder, somewhat puzzled, watched Mori as he focused intently, his small hands carefully holding the book. Miria showed Ryder what Mori had written, saying it was at least somewhat similar. Annie, however, sighed. "Miria, I think your judgment is getting clouded, just like Ryder's." Ignoring them, Mori rummaged through the books again, his curiosity piqued. He picked up an interesting-looking book and walked over to Annie, offering it to her. Understanding what he wanted, Annie asked, "Do you want to read this?" But of course, Mori couldn't read yet. So, Annie began to read it, while Mori focused and listened. She explained that it seemed to describe some kind of phenomenon, pyrop. Ryder, overhearing this, raised an eyebrow. "That's division," he corrected, then turned to Annie. "Don't you remember what I taught you about it?" Annie hesitated before replying, "I don't really know the context of it." Miria, stepping in, pointed at a passage and explained, "The method varies slightly depending on the species, and it can take hundreds of years. But basically, when the body's lifespan is up, the cells enter a dormant state to return to their original form." As everyone listened intently, "It means dividing from one to one, or from many," he said, giving an example. "I came from the judge's fourth finger." He added that they needed a safe place because, when entering pyrop, they would become completely defenseless. Now understanding it better, Annie thanked Miria for the information. After the brief lesson, Miria smiled at Mori. "How was that?" "Was it difficult?" she asked. But, as she glanced down at him, Mori was gone. In the blink of an eye, he had disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the house, a maid stumbled upon Mori, causing trouble yet again, this time scribbling all over the walls. He looked up at her with innocent, wide eyes, still in the middle of his masterpiece. The maid, ever strict about cleanliness, refused to let it slide. She handed Mori a cloth and made him clean it himself, guiding him as he wiped away his artwork. Mori, sweating and confused, couldn't understand why she was erasing his masterpiece. From the doorway, Annie, Ryder, and Miria stood watching, amused by the scene. Once Mori finished scrubbing the wall clean, he turned around, his small face scrunched up in frustration. His eyes welled with tears as he pouted, clearly upset that his drawing had been erased. Seeing this, the maid smirked and teasingly said, "Oh, I thought you weren't going to cry." She chuckled, enjoying his adorable reaction. After that, Mori still seemed unsatisfied. Miria gently explained to him that the walls were not meant for drawing and taught him not to do it again. Meanwhile, Ryder decided to scare Mori a little, warning him that if he did it again, Yahello would come after him, calling him a rascal in the process. Suddenly, the bell rang outside, signaling that mail had arrived. Ryder instantly panicked, muttering, "Me?" as if instinctively referring to himself. Without wasting a second, He rushed outside to grab the mail before anyone else could. Miria watched him, confused by his reaction. However, when Ryder finally checked the letter, he let out a sigh of relief. It had nothing to do with him. Grinning, he handed the letter to Miria. "Thank you," Miria said as she took it. Ryder, still trying to play it cool, replied, "No problem." But deep inside, he was thinking how lucky he was, that this letter wasn't a wanted poster of him. As Miria read through the letter, her expression suddenly changed. Her eyes widened in shock, and she was completely taken aback by its contents. "Ryder!" she called out, her voice firm. Hearing his name, Ryder immediately tensed up. His mind raced with possibilities. What was in that letter? Did Miria find out something about him? Miria's gaze darkened. "We need to talk," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ryder froze. Seeing her like that left him stunned and bewildered. He hesitantly approached her, wondering what he could have possibly done wrong. His mind filled with speculation. Had Miria noticed something? If so, how much did she know? Maybe it was best if he confessed first, before things got worse. Determined to get ahead of the situation, he took a deep breath and prepared to speak. But before he could say anything, Miria held something out to him. A stone. The moment Ryder saw it, he recognized it immediately. "This," Miria began, "is a stone that opens the door to the judge's chamber." Ryder's blood ran cold. She continued, "I contacted the judge." At that moment, Ryder felt like the ground beneath him had disappeared. Panic flooded through him, sweat forming on his brow. Did Miria report him? How long had she known? Had she just been letting his guard down this whole time? Was she planning to throw him into jail? His mind spiraled into complete chaos. But then, his thoughts came to a screeching halt. But Miria finally spoke up. "Have you ever thought about joining the patch?" Ryder's eyes widened in absolute shock. His breath caught in his throat. This was not what he was expecting at all. And that's how Ryder found himself at a loss for words. Ryder was confused and couldn't think properly about how to respond to what Miria had just said. An awkward atmosphere settled between them as they looked at each other. Sensing his hesitation, Miria asked if it was too sudden, while Ryder, stuttering, tried to respond, insisting that it wasn't like that. However, at that moment, he seemed too puzzled to give her a proper answer. To clarify the situation, Miria explained that she had sent a message to the judge, stating that she wanted to make Mori a member of their family. Now, she had received a response instructing them to go there and meet with them. She elaborated further, pointing out that, as Ryder knew, there weren't many laws or precedents regarding humans. Because of this, she believed the higher-ups likely wanted to see both Mori and her in person. However, she had yet to hear from Shalom, but since they always encountered her for such matters, she was certain they would be pleased. As Ryder listened, he appeared surprised and somewhat amazed. Miria continued, explaining that if Mori were officially registered as a member of their family, then any actions taken by the town against him would be considered an attack on them. However, once she cleared the bounty on him, she could ensure his safety. Hearing this, Ryder was visibly shocked and asked Miria how she knew he had a wanted poster and for how long she had known about it. Miria admitted that she had known from the very beginning. Ryder, still confused, pointed out that allowing a wanted person to stay with her would eventually raise questions from the higher-ups. He seemed concerned about this, but Miria reassured him, saying she would explain that it was because of Mori, who had been crying and clearly relied on Ryder a lot. This would allow them to present an appeal, and if the higher-ups pushed further, she would have no choice but to subdue them. Hearing this, Ryder no longer seemed worried. He knew how powerful Miria was, especially since her black hole ability was not just for show. Miria also recalled how Ryder had first met Mori, which led to the bounty being placed on him. However, she pointed out that Ryder's bounty wouldn't be easy to erase, even though dealing with the aliens who issued it might not be difficult. As Ryder listened intently, he silently agreed with her assessment. After that, Miria handed the stone to Ryder, telling him that life with them might be less exciting than when he and Mori were traveling. Then, with a teasing smile, she added that she wanted Ryder to be her husband. Just kidding. What she actually meant was that she wanted him to stay with them as family. Her words carried a sincere warmth and affection, leaving Ryder momentarily stunned. Seeing his reaction, Miria smiled and told him to seriously consider it. Ryder looked at her, his voice trembling slightly as he slowly said that he would, meaning he accepted her request. Afterward, as Ryder stepped outside, he noticed Mori quietly sleeping on the floor, with Annie standing nearby, guarding him. Curious, Ryder asked why their cute Mori was sleeping on the ground. Without hesitation, he gently picked up Mori, placing him against his chest and carrying him carefully. Annie, watching him closely, eyed him suspiciously and asked why he looked so happy. Ryder, caught off guard, asked what she was talking about, but Annie insisted that she must have missed something, that something good must have happened. Flustered, Ryder quickly denied it, raising his voice slightly but keeping it quiet enough to avoid waking Mori. The two began bickering again as usual. The scene shifted as Ryder was busy adjusting Mori's cloak. He then smiled and said, "There, it's done. Our cute Mori is now very clean and beautiful." He then turned to the others saying, "First impressions are very important when it comes to socializing," and added that he had put in the effort to make Mori look even more presentable. He also reminded Mori not to be nervous, to stay calm, and to smile. While they were all making preparations and chatting happily, Ryder noticed Mori fidgeting again. With a soft smile, Ryder called his name, and when Mori looked up at him, he told him to take care of his bag and retrieve the stone inside. He then took the stone, made it into a necklace, and gently placed it around Mori's neck. Taking the other half of the stone for himself, Ryder explained that this piece symbolized him, that no matter what, he would always be there for Mori. Hearing this, Mori seemed to calm down, his nervousness fading. Seeing him more composed, Miria, who seems worried, approached and asked if it was too difficult for him. She assured him that if needed, she could request to postpone it, allowing him more time to prepare without fear or pressure. However, Mori quickly shook his head in refusal, firmly declining her offer. Noticing his newfound confidence and determination, Miria and Ryder exchanged glances, both smiling. Then Miria retrieved the stone, which suddenly transformed into a portal door. Everyone stood still, watching as it materialized before them. Miria then spoke, saying she needed to go first to pay her respects. She reminded Yahello and Mori to wait outside and follow their practiced steps when the time came. With that, she stepped inside. Mori, despite a flicker of nervousness returning, took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and walked forward with confidence. When he reopened them, he found himself in an unfamiliar place, surrounded by numerous alien beings. Outside the portal, Ryder and the others observed everything on a screen, watching intently. Inside, Miria stepped forward toward the center. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath her as the air grew tense. The atmosphere was heavy, radiating an eerie energy. A massive figure appeared, a glowing blue entity resembling a galactic void. The being's presence was overwhelming. It spoke, demanding an explanation from Miria. Without hesitation, she bowed respectfully before it. Watching from outside, Ryder's face paled as he trembled slightly, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He muttered to himself, wondering if that was the judge. After completing her formalities, Miria subtly gestured with her hand, a signal. Yahello, noticing it, gently patted Mori on the shoulder, reminding him to stay calm and look straight at the judge. Mori nodded in understanding before stepping forward. As he walked, a large circle of light suddenly surrounded him. But this time, Mori, having experienced something similar before, remained composed. Although he still felt a tinge of nervousness, he clenched his fist and continued walking with steady confidence. Seeing Mori successfully handle the situation, Ryder and the others cheered for him from outside, proud of his progress. They celebrated, attributing his calmness to the shadow games they had played as training. Meanwhile, Mori, focused entirely on reaching his mother, Miria, kept his eyes locked on her as she stood in the center, with her arms open waiting for him. However, just as he was about to take another step, he suddenly froze. Something caught his attention. He looked up, his eyes widening in shock. At that moment, a memory resurfaced. He recognized the figures before him. They were the ones who had captured him. As Mori saw those alien figures, he ran away, but slipped and slammed into the ground. Ryder and the others grew worried upon seeing Mori suddenly panicked and terrified. Miria was shocked, and Giles hadn't expected it at all. As the alien approached Mori, he grabbed his arm and asked if he was okay. Mori, sweating and confused, looked as if he had no idea what was happening. When he turned to his mother, Miria, with a distressed expression, she immediately shouted, demanding they stop. But as the alien tried to touch Mori again, Mori's perspective twisted. He saw them as threatening figures, their presence giving off an ominous atmosphere. Miria continued to shout at them not to touch Mori, but before anyone could react, Mori bit down on the alien's wrist. The alien was completely taken aback, shocked, and demanded to know what Mori was doing, telling him to stop. However, Mori, overwhelmed by fear and distrust, refused to let go. The alien struggled to pry Mori's fangs from his wrist, wincing in pain and demanding he release him. Meanwhile, Miria desperately tried to reach Mori while preparing to cast her black hole ability. But the guards immediately intervened, warning her that using powers there was forbidden. She hesitated, frustration and helplessness washing over her as she watched the scene unfold. Then, suddenly, a streak of blue energy flashed past her, snatching Mori away in an instant. He vanished, leaving Miria and Ryder stunned and terrified. But thankfully, the energy wasn't hostile. It had a calming effect on Mori, making him drowsy. Before anyone could react, Mori was gently placed in the center of the judge's domain. Miria could only watch as the judge took Mori away, stating that he needed to hear an explanation regarding the situation. Outside, as Miria recounted everything to Ryder, he grew furious upon hearing what the judge had decided, calling it nonsense. Miria remained silent for a moment before finally speaking. She explained that the judges believed Mori was extremely unstable and suspected that it might be because of her. Because of this, they had decided to keep Mori within the judge's territory. Ryder, outraged, demanded to know the basis of their claim. However, Miria remained calm, sitting quietly as she replayed the events in her mind. The way Mori bit the alien's hand as they tried to take him, the moment they seized him. Then, a troubling thought crossed her mind. Why was the alien search team inside the judge's chamber in the first place? A few days earlier, the three alien judges had expressed their confusion about how a human from Salam territory could have made it all the way to Miria's domain. They questioned how a human child could have possibly traveled such a great distance alone. As Ryder and the others watched, Miria prepared to speak. But before she could, the judges directly confronted her, demanding the truth. They asked if she had wanted the human infant so badly that she had secretly ordered her servant to take him from the shelter. Miria, outraged by the accusation, shouted that she would never do such a thing. She insisted that Mori had left Salam on his own. But the judges were skeptical, doubting that an infant as young as Mori could have crossed the Salam territory boundary alone. In response, Miria explained that she had made clothes for Mori using lauder fabric, and she suspected that was the reason he had been able to cross the border. As the judges listened, they questioned Miria, asking if she had deliberately created the weakened boundary after learning of its vulnerability. She immediately denied it, explaining that she had only read in the records that humans could be weakened by small things. She had given Mori the fabric, hoping he would grow up healthy, not for any other reason. She added that she had grown worried when they hadn't received any updates from the shelter about Mori for months. So, she sent her servant to check on him, only to discover that Mori had disappeared. From that moment, they began tracking him down. She also stated that this was the first time she had heard about the Salam boundary weakening. When the judges asked when Mori had arrived in the city, Miria replied that a traveler had brought him there. The judges then asked where that traveler was now, causing Miria to hesitate before answering that he was no longer in the city. Ryder, who had been silently watching and listening, suspected that Miria was covering him up to protecting him. The judges, however, stated that without the traveler's presence, there was no way to prove her claim. Miria reluctantly agreed. The judges continued, explaining that when Mori arrived at the city center, the traveler had briefly lost sight of him, and in that short moment, Mori was nearly kidnapped after bumping into a citizen. To make matters worse, the traveler had used forbidden force to intervene, an action that could have seriously harmed the human infant. They then asked Miria if she understood what she had done wrong. Miria acknowledged her carelessness and sincerely apologized. Without hesitation, the judges then stated bluntly that, since Mori was human, he did not qualify to stay. They argued that he should have been sent back to human society from the very beginning. They also questioned why a human was even in their territory in the first place. Because of this, they proposed relocating Mori to a restricted zone. Miria immediately protested, pleading with them to consider the emotional toll on the child. She argued that Mori had already been forced to adapt to multiple new environments, and relocating him again would only add to his distress. Even if the restricted zone resembled their current environment, she explained that it was inhabited by humans completely different from those Mori had grown up with. How would he survive there? One of the judges then pointed out that Mori couldn't even communicate properly with humans, claiming that he lacked the intelligence to speak fluently. They asked Miria if she agreed with their assessment. Miria firmly disagreed, explaining that while Mori wasn't completely fluent yet, he could express his emotions clearly. She then pleaded with them to allow her to speak to him. Some of the judges agreed, while others remained skeptical. However, one judge stated that their priority was the happiness and safety of the human child. With that, they decided to end the discussion, saying it was enough for the day and that the meeting was dismissed. As the meeting concluded, Miria remained seated, lost in deep thought. She looked visibly sad, her mind weighed down by everything that had been discussed. As she was about to leave, a sudden voice called out to her. In an instant, she was transported to another dimension. Before her stood the hired judges, and they told her it was an order. Then a familiar figure appeared. Mori. He was waving at her, happily approaching. Seeing him filled Miria with joy, and as Mori ran toward her and jumped into her arms, she instinctively embraced him, holding her little round one tightly. But as time passed, Mori grew older and older. Today the judges spoke to her again, reminding her that humans do not live as long as they do. They asked her if she could bear to witness the inevitable. Hearing this, Miria became overwhelmed with emotion. Tears welled up in her eyes and streamed down her face as she clutched Mori's tightly, a sadness consuming her. And that's the end of this chapter. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed it. See you in the next one.